We lift and move things every day, but sometimes arm strength just isn't enough, and it takes major lifting power to get the job done. That's where cranes come in. Their lifting capability can be indispensable in both industrial and construction operations, but it also creates potential hazards for the people who work with them. In this program, we'll discuss the hazards that can be associated with cranes, the federal regulations that have been established to protect you from these hazards, and the policies and procedures you should follow to work safely with cranes. Over the years, different types of cranes have been created to meet the requirements of different types of lifting and operating environments. Although the equipment may share many similarities, it's important to understand their differences as well in order to use them safely. Most industrial cranes fall into three basic categories: overhead cranes, jib cranes, and boom cranes. Overhead cranes are typically attached to support platforms or the walls of buildings. The hoist cable and hook of these cranes move along a track called a bridge, usually in a straight line. Their tracks are usually fixed in place. Most jib cranes are also fixed in place, but they can have a greater range of motion because their horizontal arm can pivot from side to side. The arm is locked in a horizontal position, however, so its vertical angle can't be changed. Boom cranes are similar to jib cranes in that their hoist cable and hook hang from an arm that can pivot. But the angle of a boom crane arm can be adjusted, and the length of some booms can be changed as well. While this makes boom cranes more versatile, it also means that more variables have to be taken into account to use the equipment safely. This is why boom cranes, such as truck or tower cranes, are considered to be the most complicated type of lifting equipment. While we don't specifically cover tower cranes in this program, much of what we're discussing does apply to them as well. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, more than 5 workers are killed every month while performing tasks associated with cranes, derricks, and hoists, and many others are injured. The crane, a boom, or the load itself can fall on them. They can be caught in a crane's moving parts, or be crushed between a load and a wall or other immovable object. They can even be electrocuted if the crane gets too close to an overhead power line. To address these hazards, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, has created safety regulations for cranes and similar equipment that is used in both general industry and construction. OSHA's crane standards establish policies and procedures that are intended to prevent incidents and protect the health and safety of employees who work with cranes. These rules cover issues including the assembly and disassembly of crane equipment, the ground conditions that are required for safe crane operation, how to work safely around power lines, and the hand signals that should be used for communications during crane operations. The OSHA standards also establish the qualifications and training that operators, signal persons, maintenance, and repair personnel must have in order to work with cranes. All crane operators must be licensed by a government agency or certified either by an accredited testing organization or audited employer program. OSHA also requires employers to qualify each operator by assessing their knowledge and ability. Signal persons must be qualified by either a third-party qualified evaluator or their employer's own qualified evaluator, based on the criteria that OSHA specifies in the standards. Employees who perform maintenance and repair tasks can only operate a crane as part of their work if they are familiar with how that specific type of crane functions, or they are directly supervised by a qualified or certified crane operator. Safe practices for crane operations begin well before you rig the load or fire up the equipment. They start with an inspection of the crane. This helps to prevent incidents and injuries by identifying problems before they become major malfunctions. The process begins with a thorough visual inspection. Look for missing parts, signs of excessive wear, leaks, cracks, and other damage. Then check the crane's fluid levels. Refill them as needed. Test the brakes and other controls to make sure that they are all functioning the way they should. When you start up the crane, listen for any unusual noises. These can alert you to mechanical problems that you can't see. When inspecting the crane's hardware, pay special attention to the hook. If its safety latch is bent or broken, don't use it. It could result in the load slipping off, dumping and damaging materials, and possibly injuring a rigger or bystander. Be on the lookout for damage to other parts of the hook as well. Replace it when the opening has been stretched wider by 15% or more, or it has been twisted out of alignment by more than 10 degrees. After you have completed a general inspection, you should focus on special features of the particular type of crane you're working with. For example, overhead cranes are equipped with end stops that prevent cranes from running off the rails, and bumpers that absorb the impact when the crane reaches the end of its travel. These parts are prone to wear and tear, so make sure they are in place, undamaged, and functional before you start your work. When you're using a jib crane, make sure you know the jib arm's range of motion so you can prevent your hands, fingers, or other body parts from being caught in the equipment or being hit when it swings. And test the hoist brake to ensure that it can safely stop and hold the load. Even if you're not a crane operator, your assistance can still be very important if you're working on a job that involves a crane. If something doesn't look right with the equipment, you need to report it to the equipment operator or your supervisor. Boom cranes offer their users great power and lifting capability, but to work with them safely, you need to use caution and pay attention to detail. If things go wrong while a boom crane is making a lift, it's often because mistakes were made when the crane was being set up. Improper setup can cause the crane to dump the load, damage the crane and the materials being hoisted, tip the crane over, all potentially resulting in worker injuries or even fatalities. Before making a lift, you can guard against these hazards by making sure that the crane is level and consulting its load chart to determine its weight limits and proper boom adjustment. A boom crane is equipped with legs called outriggers, which are used to stabilize the crane and keep it level. Make sure the outriggers rest on solid ground after they have been extended. If necessary, lay wood or metal plates down under the legs to ensure firm footing. The bubble level that is mounted on the crane will help you to adjust the outriggers properly. Once you have the crane set up correctly, you can think about lifting the load. The crane's load chart will indicate how much weight the equipment can safely lift when the boom is set to various angles and lengths. Never guess at these numbers. A copy of the chart should be permanently attached to the crane, and your supervisor may have a copy as well. When you're calculating the weight of a load, remember to include all the lifting accessories, such as the rigging, block, and hook. Then use the chart to determine the boom length and angle that are required for safe and efficient operation. Once you have familiarized yourself with the crane you're going to use and set it up correctly, you are ready to rig the load. First, make sure there's nothing in the area to get in the way of workers or equipment. Clear away boxes, tools, materials, and debris that may be lying around. When using a sling, choose the type that is best suited to lifting the load safely. Synthetic web slings will generally not mar or crush the load they carry. Chain and wire rope slings have great strength for heavy lifting. Metal mesh slings are designed to resist damage due to hot, abrasive, or sharp-edged loads. Always check a sling's load rating to make sure it can carry the amount of weight you plan to lift. The hitch that is used to connect the load to the crane hook should keep good control of the load. A vertical hitch is the simplest type, directly connecting the attachment point on a load to the crane hook. A basket hitch cradles a load and distributes tension over more of the sling. A choker hitch tightens on the load as it is lifted, exerting pressure over a full 360 degrees. The crane should be positioned so that the hoist rope hangs straight down, directly over the center of the load. The load must be lifted straight up and put down the same way. Lifting off-center could damage the crane or the load, or injure people who are working nearby. Next, attach the load to the hook. Be sure to position the sling at the center of the hook where it's strongest. Never position the sling on the tip of the hook, where the weight of the load can bend or weaken it. At this point, the signal person should use standard hand signals to ask the operator to make a trial lift. Raise the load about a foot off the ground to confirm that the rigging is secure and the load is under control. If everything's okay, you can proceed with the lift. As the load rises, pay close attention to the angle between it and the ground. A load is most secure when it's level. A lift angle greater than 10 degrees could dump the load. If the load angle appears to be too great, lower the load again and adjust the sling to better balance it. Once a load leaves the ground, the next challenge is to move or travel with it safely. With fixed equipment such as overhead and jib cranes, this can be accomplished by moving the hoist block or jib arm. Remember, if you need to change speed, do it gradually. Sudden stops and starts can cause the load to swing or make it unstable. While a mobile or crawler crane can swing its boom to move a load while staying in one place, sometimes the crane itself will travel with the load. In these cases, you should always drive the equipment steadily at low speed. Watch where you're going and keep an eye on the load. An effective way to control a load while it's being moved is to attach one or more ropes called tag lines to the hoist block or the load itself. Having someone put tension on the tag line can help to guide the load smoothly and safely to its destination. Never pass a load over a coworker or let anyone walk underneath it. To land the load safely when it has reached its destination, you should lower it slowly. Stop a few inches above the ground to make sure everything is secure, then lower it the rest of the way. Never leave a load hanging. A suspended load is an accident waiting to happen. Someone could walk or drive into it, or it could fall. Once the load is on the ground, remember to remove the slings from the load and the hook. Slings that are left on the hook can snag on other objects when the hoist starts moving again. You should also raise the hoist block high enough so that no one will hit their head on it or run into it with another piece of equipment. As we've seen, using cranes can create hazards in both industrial and construction work. But by following proper policies and procedures, it is possible to prevent incidents and injuries. Let's review. It's important to understand the OSHA crane regulations and how they affect you and your coworkers. Always familiarize yourself with the type of crane that you will be using before you use it. Make a visual inspection of a crane before working with it. Check the fluid levels and test the controls. Make sure boom cranes are properly set up before lifting a load. Rig every load securely. Keep the load angle under 10 degrees. Avoid sudden stops and starts while traveling with a load, and land every load you lift. Now that you know the hazards that are associated with working with cranes, as well as the safe practices that can help you guard against them, you can help ensure that you and your coworkers go home safe at the end of every day.